Good afternoon. So my talk is based on MLit research carried out in UCD, and as well just on my own experience of researching content for heritage tours. So just to jump straight into it, from the lithics perspective, for the last 150 years, Bronze Age Chalcolithic lithics have been largely subjected to negative trends in terms of perception and understanding. So if we look through, there's a few, they're all interconnected, they're misrepresented in terms of how they're positioned in the record. There's unsupported assertions in terms of their interpretations. They're often overlooked as well. And then we also see how they're talked about. There's comparisons which just don't, they're not assessed by themselves. So in this case, we could look at, say, residual. A lot of Bronze Age sites with lithics, they're quite often just classed as residual and attributed to the Neolithic without any consideration for contemporaneous activity. You'd also have, rather than assessing them for themselves, they'll be compared to metal artifacts of the period, or they'll be compared and contrasted with Neolithic or Mesolithic lithics. So while this negative trend and these substrands are important to pick apart and address, I'll actually move on to what I think is the underlying trend behind this, and that is one of poor dissemination around academic research. An overriding thought behind this presentation was an adaptation about trees and people and sound. If a student writes a thesis and you're not aware of it, or you cannot access it, have they actually made a contribution to Irish archaeology? But in this case, I think the answer is very simple and clear, and it's no, they haven't. So to just look at the academic research behind Bronze Age lithics, we have three theses we can focus on. O'Hare from 2005, PhD, Sconnell from 1992, an MA, and Sproul from 1968, an MA. And if we look at the dissemination around these, we can see that there's been very little engagement over them with the broader archaeological community. So in terms of publication, O'Hare possibly, there's a proof copy for a bar publication on her website, which is incredibly hard to find. Other than that, and as a proof copy, it's not really a valid reference for anybody. It gives us an indication of what was in her thesis, but it's not a valid reference for us to use. In terms of presentation, she might have, but unfortunately with presentations, once you do them, you're gone, and any account of information in that is second or third hand, quite often, of somebody who is at it and passes it on. Her thesis is referenced, so we do see it referenced both in general publications such as Keeler Knowles or other publications focusing on the period, so Carlin's assessment of beaker assemblages for the Chalcolithic. You also see it in lithic reports. However, where it is referenced, it's generally O'Hare 2005. It is very rare that you will see page numbers giving specific statements back up within that. And I would take that as a sign of very limited engagement, that this is somebody who's had half a day to sit in a library and very quickly give a cursory read to the thesis and not actually be able to pull out any specifics from it. And it certainly doesn't show re-engagement. So going back, and this is where a lot of value in theses is going back a year or two later after your own experience and knowledge has expanded and re-engaging with those theses. I think this shows a reference like this shows a lack of that, especially in a specialist report such for lithics. With Sconnell, we do have a publication. Her entire thesis, so the Lochgar site was one specific site she dealt with, and this was with Woodman. They wrote up an article specifically focusing on Lochgar, so the rest of her thesis was largely absent from that publication. However, these 10 pages, more or less, are the best published material we have from these three theses on Irish Bronze Age lithics. Again, similar problem with presentation. Her thesis is referenced largely by O'Hare, and in some lithic reports beyond that, you don't see it probably used too often. And then when we come to Sproul, 1968, no publication found in any journals or anything afterwards. Again, presentation of Dunno, and it's not referenced. It's not known by Scannell. It's not known by O'Hare in either of those theses. And probably when we look at this summary of lithic assemblages from different archaeological periods by Woodman in 1984, so 14 years earlier, 16 years earlier, Sproul had identified cores, identified debitage products, identified typological artifacts, all of which are completely absent from Woodman's assessment of Bronze Age assemblages 14 years later. If the preeminent lithic specialist at that time can't identify and incorporate research into that understanding, this is what is feeding into negative trends later on, where people overlook lithics, misinterpret them, misrepresent them. And so I would say, well, this is specific to lithics. I'd say when we look at the broader use of theses and dissemination and publication around them, we see a continuation of this trend and across kind of most content, not just lithics. So when we look at academic promotion around theses, and I'm not just talking about PhDs, I would include all postgraduates, so MAs, MLits, MPhils, up to PhD. And I would also include some undergraduate theses there. If they have value, then currently we get lists of them, generally on a website. So you just scroll down through a list and you get the name, the title of the thesis, and the year that it was awarded, and you're given no other information about it. You can look through library catalogues, but again, you're only sourcing the same information, nothing else. And you are starting to see kind of the databases coming online for universities where you can access full theses. However, in terms of the overall catalogue of postgraduate research, what's available on those is very, very limited. And if you think about it, theses are probably the main contribution from the academic circles to the archaeological community, more so than staff publications or postdoc projects. Every year there's probably 30 to 40 theses across all universities added to the corpus of our literature around archaeological research, and that is very difficult to identify what exactly that content is and how it can contribute to Irish archaeology. Probably the best catalogue was kind of from UCC, where you can actually download a PDF, and this has a lot of value here because rather than just recent years, they go right back to the start. So I think they start in the early 1900s and list every thesis coming through, so you can see that kind of historical catalogue of theses, which still have value. If it's the only thesis, if it's from 1920s, 1940s, if it's the only thesis on that topic or on that region, and you're going back now, there's information, there's views there that are still as relevant, and if it's the only other person who is thinking critically about that subject, it is a good source to have. But currently UCC is the only one who's actually kind of advertising that resource. Unfortunately, they stopped updating the PDF catalogue in 2015 and moved to what other universities do in terms of a list on a web page. So we're seeing a regression, I would say, in terms of that resource rather than a progression of it. And I think when you look at this promotion, we can see mismatch with other areas of the profession. So there is, so with excavations.ie, where we try to get a quick summary of excavation reports up online. It might not be the full report, but it's certainly an indication of what is there. And this is a very useful tool for any researcher coming through. But we don't see a similar aspect coming through in terms of academic promotion material. And then also there is a legacy issue. So going back to the UCD PDF, where they're presenting those historical theses, this isn't the case with other places. So there is a legacy issue, which again is being addressed through other projects, significant unpublished Irish excavations which go back. And those, there is a legacy issue there which can be addressed in terms of the academic promotion of their thesis resource. Now, some comments today have shown there are issues with these, and they're not perfect, but there is an attempt there to push information out, and you can see other projects such as OS 200 in other parts of the community where they're going back to those older sources and trying also to push those out. So in terms of how we can change this or address this, we would have a proposal, and it kind of follows on from the UCD PDF catalogue is in that is revisited and it's expanded. So you're still keeping the same information, last name, first name. You can put in the course and stuff. Probably what the most important aspect of this is the abstract from the thesis. We produce them for conferences, for journals. They are written for every thesis as well, and yet they're never presented bar on the library shelf when you're going to actually look at the actual thesis, including these in a PDF document produced each year after whatever theses are awarded. Would be a wonderful resource for the community to kind of look and see what has been researched, what is the content of it. And then also, kind of more importantly, would be contact information. Having the name on the other websites, it gives you something, but trying to chase somebody down on LinkedIn or through Facebook or some other thing it's, you know, if there's 20 people with the same name, you're kind of end up scrolling through profiles, kind of trying to match, well, is this person who was in Cork in, 2010 or whatever. Just, and these could be optional things. Some people won't want to give them out, but you just leave them the choice, leave them the field to put in and say, do you want people to contact you and engage you with your research? Or you could leave it as a permission to send on. So I'm happy for the university to send on a PDF if somebody requests it. Or with the likes of, say, academia.eu, you could put in a URL link as well into this if they want to, if it's uploaded in time. So people can straight away, you're increasing awareness, but then this contact or the sharing information is also increasing accessibility of that resource. So I think just in conclusion, Chalcolithic and Bronze Age lithics have been largely subjected to negative trends in presentation and understanding. This has been driven by an underlying trend of poor dissemination of relevant archaeological research into those areas. That poor dissemination continues to affect awareness and access to that resource within universities, and steps can be taken to improve the engagement of the broader profession with theses. So just to acknowledge then Graham Warren from UCD for supervising the research, Heather Jimson of EarthSound for facilitating, and then all who responded to emails, shared information, comments and reports, not just for the thesis but also for the tour content, and then the board of the IAI for accepting the talk here today. Thank you.